The world of Monster Hunter is beautiful. A varied landscape inhabited by ferocious beasts. One of my ongoing obsessions has been to attempt to map out this world, pin down where each location is on its world map by sifting through the lore books and game dialogue. In the previous episode of this video series, we constructed the shape of the world map from canon sources, and populated it with towns and hunting grounds related to the first generation of Monster Hunter. This time, we'll discuss the locations seen in the series' second generation, spanning the games from Monster Hunter DOS up to and including Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. This was a generation when Monster Hunter started to take its own world building very seriously, and is also the last time we got concrete, explicit map placements for in-game locations. So, let's get started and explore the lands of Monster Hunter. Before we jump into the new stuff, allow me to quickly clarify a few things from the previous episode. I realized that I just dropped this map on you all without really explaining what you're looking at. Specifically, these colored areas I used for hunting ground locations were very fun to draw and look nice, but I realized they could be misleading. So to be perfectly clear, the denoted hunting grounds are not stretched across this entire area, but rather are located somewhere within its confines. We don't tend to get exact placements for hunting grounds, so this is the best way to illustrate this that I have found. Next, when I told you about Kokoto Village, I used a book source to determine that the monster the hero of Kokoto fought in the famous legend was probably a monobloss and not a Lao Shan Lung. However, I have since looked into it further and, surprise, it is actually a little more complicated than that. Quick reminder, in the Japanese version of Monster Hunter, wyverns and elder dragons are both called dragons, but the kanji used to spell their titles is different. It is true that in Hunter's Encyclopedia reprint, the hero is described to have battled a one-horned wyvern, which is spelled the exact same way as the monobloss's official Japanese title. But then, in Monster Hunter Freedom, the story is told using the expression Kuryu, or Elder Dragon, instead. Hunter's Encyclopedia 1's telling of the story, meanwhile, describes the fiend by spelling out the English word dragon in katakana, and calls the battle in which the hero's lover dies a dragon conquest or dragon suppression, using the kanji that in Monster Hunter usually denotes elder dragons rather than wyvern. But then, in the Dive to Iceborne book, the most recent source we have, the hero is described to have fought a flying wyvern, and that it was this flying wyvern which caused the death of his lover. So, what is going on here? One possibility is that this is a case of historical confusion. Remember, all of Monster Hunter lore is told from an in-universe perspective, meaning that there is always a possibility of unreliable narrators. The legend of the hero of Kokoto is a popular and old folktale, so perhaps these contradictions are included to emphasize the way a myth like that would be distorted over time as people tell and retell it. Another possibility is that the hero of Kokoto actually fought multiple legendary battles. In the Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 version of the legend, he is first described as facing a one-horned wyvern. But then, when talking about the death of his lover, the book suddenly switches to using dragon in katakana, implying that the hero first fought a monobloss and then later lost his fiancée to a dragon in a separate incident. Feel free to draw your own conclusions on this and let me know in the comments if you want. I also hope you're starting to understand why Monster Hunter lore can be so hard to pin down sometimes. Massive thanks to Shred Academy, Goji, and Lutyrannus for their help on clarifying this for me. Lastly, I realized that I kept calling the Geocrux Sea a lake in the previous video. The Japanese uses the kanji kai, which tends to denote large bodies of salt water and can be used for seas surrounded mostly by land, such as the Caspian or Mediterranean seas. So the Geocrux Sea is probably more comparable to those than to a lake. No clue why my brain just defaulted to calling it a lake, to be honest. I guess this goes to show why it was a good idea to make this a video series. I get to fact check myself as we go along like this. Right, enough corrections, let's get to the main event now. The second generation of Monster Hunter includes 3 named towns, all of which we get a definitive location for on the Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 map. First off, we head to the southeastern lump of the central continent. Here, on this little western protrusion of the continent, we find Jumbo Village, the single-player town from Monster Hunter DOS. This settlement was created by a young Wyverian with the goal of turning it into a bustling economic center even out here in the far frontier. To do so, he chose a spot with ample access to waterways to hopefully eventually open up a shipyard and seafaring station. The young Wyverian also recruited various experts to his town-building cause: an injured shipwright full of jolly ambition, a retired master blacksmith, an unusually motivated hunting instructor, and more. All this was not just to build a trading hub, but a place that attracts monster hunters, whose exploits and presence would surely benefit the people of the village. Through ingenuity and determination, this Wyverian was driven to weld together a strong community built on hunting and commerce. The plot of DOS thus largely revolves around fulfilling this dream, with every urgent quest essentially being tied to upgrading this village. The area around Jumbo is plentiful, with flora and fauna flourishing aplenty. The village also has a mine, which predates its existence and houses the skeleton of a Laoshan lung. If we now slingshot northwest to the northern shore of the Geocrux Sea, we arrive at what is maybe the most important town in the series, Dundorma, the online hub for Monster Hunter DOS. Carved into a steep mountain valley facing the sea, this large settlement has a long and rich history. Originally established by the indigenous people of the land, Dundorma has stood here for eons, blessed by gentle winds and clear water. It is currently under the watchful protection of its leader, the Great Elder, also called His Immenseness. A descendant of those that first built Dundorma, the Great Elder's leadership has fundamentally marked the city. Long ago, when there was no reliable way to anticipate monster attacks, the people turned to dragon seers, Wyverian experts who used limited means to roughly predict the approach of elder dragons, with varying degrees of success. It was the Great Elder who sent out a summons across the lands, beckoning these seers to Dundorma. Once assembled, the Great Elder united the dragon seers from all over into an organization dedicated to studying and intercepting elder dragons. The Elder Dragon Observation Team, localized officially as the Dragon Watch, as of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Using hot air balloons and carrier birds to survey the land and report back to their headquarters in Dundorma, the Dragon Watch has become a vital part of monitoring the movements of monsters. While their focus was initially on elder dragons, their activities have also led to groundbreaking discoveries regarding just about every monster type, and hunters' guilds all around the world have benefited from their work. Around the time of their creation, the Great Elder also converted Dundorma's Prayer Hall into the Elder Hall, which oversees and organizes hunting operations of the highest caliber. This signaled a cultural shift in Dundorma. It was no longer faith that would ward off against disaster, but the diligent work of hunters and scriveners. This is just one of the many accomplishments made by the Great Elder, which also include the establishment of a standing Guardian Corps, the maintenance of dedicated interception zones for approaching monsters, the stimulation of monster material trade in the region, and much more. For all of these actions and his eons of wisdom, the Great Elder is highly respected by all branches of the Hunters Guild community. While there doesn't seem to be one central power that governs all Hunters Guilds, they do seem to turn to Dundorma and the Great Elder for guidance in times of crisis. If you had to call any one place the capital of monster hunting, it would likely be Dundorma. Today, Dundorma is a bustling city where hunters from all over the lands gather. Markets bloom with commerce, and every day legends are born from the actions of those that pass through Dundorma. Many parts of the city are adorned with red and green decorations, symbols of a faith unique to this region that holds Rathalos and Rathian sacred. Dundorma additionally has a long history of music, with the local diva performing mesmerizing songs in the city's entertainment arena in the evenings. The city is also a natural fortress, surrounded by mountains and fortified by powerful walls and vast arrays of artillery. The people of Dundorma are also uniquely prepared for dire situations. Should an elder dragon approach the city, the citizenry is well able to barricade themselves and allow the resident hunters and guardians to repel the beast without worrying about collateral damage. All in all, in terms of size, prosperity, and prestige, Dundorma simply has no equal. By heading northeast from Dundorma, we eventually reach a mountainous, frigid region. It is here where we find Poke Village, which you may know from Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and Generations Ultimate. Located in an extremely inhospitable area where snow never melts and temperatures never rise, one would not expect this place to thrive. However, Poke benefits from some key luxury exports that have brought it prosperity. A special type of mountain grass that grows only here was found to have powerful medicinal properties when submerged in water, and various mercantile organizations and even hunters' guilds seek it out voraciously. As a result, a small village was able to spring up here, supported by the steady flow of income from this special herb. As hunters' guilds were among the clients that enabled this development, Poke was built with a town hall that doubles as a branch office for hunters' guild affairs. This has ensured steady collaboration and has allowed Poke Village to build various amenities to aid any hunters that pass through. At the back of the village stands the Great Macalite, revered as a symbol of the village. Another unique feature of Poke is their domestication of Popo, local herbivore monsters that are often used as beasts of burden. While this has eased much of the heavy work required to live out in the mountains, it brings with it its own host of challenges. For example, that the fat, idle herds of Popo attract gluttonous monsters such as Tigrex into the vicinity of the village. Another, more mysterious feature of Poke Village is the cave situated near it. For a long time, the cave entrance was sealed off by a thick layer of seemingly permanent frost. Somewhat recently, though, that ice wall collapsed, revealing a truly puzzling sight. An enormous greatsword, much too large to be wielded by anyone, embedded into the stone. Stories have circulated that it belonged to an ancient hero battling a massive monster in the deep snow, but no concrete information remains. What is, however, an undeniable reality is the sword's bizarre property. It is made up of an entirely unknown ore and will, miraculously, regenerate itself if some of the ore is chipped off. This has allowed researchers and hunters to gather small samples of the ore for analysis and crafting, but no notable breakthroughs in understanding the blade's origins have so far been made. That covers us as far as in-game towns go, so let's move on to second generation hunting grounds. If we start at Jumbo Village and then travel northeast, we arrive at this small wedge, which is where the Gen 2 jungle is located. You may also simply know this place as the jungle from Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Remember, these colored areas don't show the size of the hunting ground, just a rough look at where the hunting ground may be, since we don't get precise placements like we do for villages. Like many early series hunting grounds, this one also gets a bespoke name in the books, being called the Terosu Jungle. It is a lush and humid environment, where a massive central tree filters rainwater down through its branches and into the lower levels, enabling a diverse and vibrant ecosystem. Many valuable resources, such as special mushrooms, can be found here, guarded by an array of diverse monster species. Maybe most striking, however, are the ancient ruins that saturate the area, especially the north. Underground, a massive ritual hall has been discovered, the purpose of which has been lost to time. While little is known of what kind of civilization once dwelt here and used these ruins, ancient writings and murals have suggested that the culture of Terosu initially worshipped the elder dragon Kushala Daora, later turning on it for unclear reasons and battling it ferociously. Moving on, by heading to Dundorma and then turning northwest, we find ourselves north of the Old Swamp. Here lies the Gen 2 Swamp, which newer players may know as the Marshlands from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. The books call this place the Cruptious Wetlands, although you could localize that name a few different ways as well. It is a humid and rainy zone, where the skies seldom clear. The abundance of water sources does, however, promote the growth of flora and fungi, and it's also apparently a popular fishing location for those brave and able enough to venture here. And bravery is indeed necessary. Various species of poisonous plants and mushrooms saturate the area, and at night, their fluids pool in the many puddles of the marsh and mix into a deadly sludge, emitting toxic vapors that spell doom for any that come into contact with them. Despite its seeming roughness, the marshlands do play many vital ecological roles, from water purification to flood control. Next, we head way south, into the desert regions, zooming past even Rekusara and the Old Desert. Down here, we find the Gen 2 Desert, which Hunter's Encyclopedia 2 calls the Sekumeya Desert. The name itself is stated to mean dry sea, although we are not told what language it is in. Being further south than the Old Desert, Sekumeya experiences much harsher temperatures, scorching during the day and freezing during the night. It is in fact so harsh that hunting activity is entirely forbidden here during the hot season, as the average day temperatures are deadly to humans during that time. All the inhabitants of this region are said to be very aggressive due to the harsh conditions they must endure. Hunter activity has revealed the existence of various oases here, as well as underground lakes that house Piscine wyverns. If we slingshot back northeast to Poke Village, you can see that it is surrounded by mountain ranges. Within one of these ranges to the northwest of the village lies the Snowy Mountains hunting ground. If you perhaps started the series with Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, you may recognize it as the Arctic Ridge. The books call it the Furahia Mountains, although it's a little unclear if this name refers to just this area or the mountain range as a whole. This frigid environment is made up of tall, bitter cold mountains and slightly warmer, low grasslands. However, the wind gnaws at flesh and skin all the same, making this hunting ground quite inhospitable to humans. In the cold season, it is in fact entirely off limits, as the temperatures fall so low that any hunter would find themselves frozen, stiff, and dead. While various creatures manage to survive in these conditions, it is the Blango and their leader, the Blangonga, that truly thrive in this frozen land. Moving on, we now head down south into the Erude region, where we previously established the existence of a volcanic zone. Here, south of the old volcano, roughly in the center of the peninsula, stands the Gen 2 volcano hunting ground, called the Latio volcano in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2. This barren hellscape holds little life, save for a few shrubs and a handful of monster species such as the Gravios. The reason for that is the intense heat and constantly shifting lava, which threatens to snuff out any unprepared life form. It is a harsh hunting ground reserved only for capable hunters, and is also an area in which elder dragons are sometimes sighted. Aside from that, Latios' most noteworthy features are the rare ores and resources that can be gathered here, if one is courageous enough. Now, for this next hunting ground, we finally get to go to the eastern continent of Fonron. In the south lies the Great Forest, which is called the Batbatum Jungle in the books. The name is actually worth looking at with a bit more detail. While I call it a jungle here, the Japanese expression used here is jukai, made up of the characters for trees and sea, which would make a more literal translation sea of trees. The name is meant to denote an area completely overrun with vegetation, where trees form a dense green blanket not unlike the surface of the ocean. While I went with Batbatum Jungle on this map, you could also call it the Batbatum Rainforest, Batbatum Overgrowth, etc. Just a cool detail I thought you might appreciate. The Great Forest certainly lives up to its name. Giant trees cover the area, a vast green expanse with every inch covered in flora. Life of all kinds thrives here, as the abundance of large plants creates favorable conditions for all manner of species. Regular rainfall ensures a healthy water cycle, and in the center of the explored zone stands a singular ginormous tree, whose crown appears to be missing. This great tree is home to many different monsters, and even to an indigenous population of Linians. The most infamous species that was discovered here is the Nargacuga, and the Great Forest houses a great variety of them. One interesting fact about this hunting ground is that it actually originates from Monster Hunter Frontier, the MMO that ran from 2007 to 2019. It was later included in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, making its mainline series debut. So, the last regular hunting ground from the second generation we haven't covered yet is the Ancient Tower, as well as all of its conjoined areas, such as the Forlorn Arena and the Tower Peak. And it is here where we face our first real challenge. There is no concrete confirmation as to where the tower is located. This is very much by design. The tower is meant to be mysterious and hard to pin down, and a part of Monster Hunter DOS's story even revolves around the player searching for old manuscripts to discover its location. So, where do we put it on our map? If we inspect that encyclopedia map more closely, you might notice something interesting. While we don't get an explicit location pin for the tower, we can actually see that a tower is physically drawn onto the map, right here on Fonron, north of the Great Forest. Many of the other hunting grounds also got little map doodles like these, so it is possible that this is meant to indicate the tower's location. Also, this is the lorebook about the game that introduced the tower and gave it story relevance, so would they really add this drawing for no reason? We could probably just place the tower here and call it a day based on this alone, but let's be thorough and review some additional potential evidence. By simply looking around the tower map in DOS, we can see that it borders on some kind of vast forest area, which can also be seen from the top. This forest is briefly discussed in Monster Hunter Law of Ideas 2, an interview collection where various dev team members talk about monsters from Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and Generations Ultimate, among others. Here, in the section focusing on Molten Tigrex, they mention that the forests surrounding the tower are extremely old and primitive, producing much more oxygen than modern trees, thus nurturing large and powerful creatures such as the Molten Tigrex, which is exclusively fought at the top of the tower. The specific expression used here to describe the forest surrounding the tower is Taiko no Mori, thick old forest, literally translated. This could be read as a forest that is dense and old, or a forest that is thickly old, that is to say ancient or prehistoric. At least subjectively, this more or less tracks with the way the Great Forest is presented, a dense, untouched land of abundance, centered around a giant tree whose age is unknown. For our next piece of potential evidence, we turn to the Great Forest's crown inhabitant, the Nargacuga. During its debut in Freedom Unite, a big deal was made about it being specifically at home in the Great Forest. The encyclopedia entry on the map spends more time discussing Nargacuga than the area itself, for example. And in Monster Hunter Illustrations 1, a small note attached to some art of the Nargacuga mentions that there are in fact different colorations of it, including a white fur breed. Fast forward to Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and we find ourselves fighting a lucent Nargacuga, that is to say, a Nargacuga with partially white fur, exclusively found in one of the tower arenas. When I say exclusive, I really do mean it. Lucent Nargacuga is only fought here, even in Sunbreak, where it is one of very few monsters to be entirely excluded from the randomly generated anomaly quests. So we go from hearing about white Nargacugas potentially existing on Funron, to then fighting a white Nargacuga subspecies near the tower. I don't think this is a strong enough connection to really say anything definitively by itself, but it is at least an interesting thing to consider. Our final bit of evidence for today, however, I feel is a little stronger. In Monster Hunter DOS, the player must find 3 ancient pages to determine the location of the tower, all of which are found in relation to the Gen 2 jungle. One in the mine in Jumbo Village, which has close ties to the jungle. One at the Jumbo Market feline, who found it during a scampering around the area, and the last one from trading with the veggie elder of the jungle. Clearly, the tower holds some kind of connection with this jungle. Now, remember the ruins that litter the jungle. At the northern island, we can see what looks like a destroyed temple and, springing from that structure, various decayed remnants and pillars that seem to indicate that a larger horizontal structure may have once existed here. Potentially a bridge, with its legs still somewhat preserved. And if we reconstruct this bridge roughly, it seems to be going eastward, almost as if it once connected the jungle with Funron. This would also fit within the general architectural style we see in the tower's forlorn arena, with this massive bridge or aqueduct-like structures stretching all around the place. Seeing it line up like this, it almost feels intentional. Huge thanks to Shrade Academy from the MH Old School forums for bringing this to my attention. We can actually strengthen this connection even further. In Monster Hunter DOS, the player may very rarely see a Yamatsukami appear in the jungle before flying off. Now, coincidentally, if we trace its flight path, it appears the Elder Dragon is flying east. This is relevant because the main area that Yamatsukami is fought in is, you guessed it, the tower. So in this rare encounter, it might be flying towards the tower and towards Fonron. Now, this is where my research originally ended. But while I was editing this video, I was made aware that in Hunter's Encyclopedia 2, Yamatsukami is outright stated to have been sighted in Fonron. And since the main arena for Yama in DOS is the tower, this is another big piece of potential evidence. Big thanks to Goji and Zugzwang for pointing this out to me. Considering all of what we have just discussed, from the descriptions of the Great Forest to the connections with Lucent Nargacuga and the ruins in the jungle, I feel comfortable enough placing the tower and its adjacent maps here on Fonron, as it is drawn on the Encyclopedia map. But you don't have to agree with me. Feel free to theorize further in the comments. For now, note the red mark I put next to the tower's name. This indicates that this is a speculated location and not canonically confirmed, just so we can differentiate between the stuff that's certain and the stuff we theorize into existence. And so, this is what our map looks like at the end of the second generation. This was, again, mostly straightforward with the exception of the tower. Get used to theorizing like this, because from this point onwards, nearly nothing has a confirmed location, and we'll have to get our theorist goggles on to make any further progress. But for now, this is what we got. And with that, I think we can sign off for today. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of the Monster Hunter world and learned something new. Let me know in the comments what you think of the map so far. But for now, see you next time, take care, and happy hunting. I would also like to thank all of my lovely patrons and YouTube channel members, without whom videos like these would not be possible. A very special thank you to Lufish, Morgelblank, Tacti Wolf, Thyla Zero, Glitchy, Jacob Coleman, Hellbug Hunter, Shebo, M1Have12, Regal Eagle, Ronger97, Quali, Matt Hat 124, My Name Gone, The Dollarfish, King Dre, Ryan Hook, Veraxis, Thick, Kuroneko, Zion HV Augensen, Alistair, Jacob the Numbnut, Soruka, Sir Newt Newt, Evie, Rambling Robin, Hashi, Black Ace 202, Dissy, Hubble Himbro Mirror, Magenta Magenta, Russell, Vulgar Beast, Person 212, Claire Miboon, Oakwood Tree, Mr. Pyramid, Makot02, Geo, Nils Schlatter, Iron Camel, and I'm going to bed. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.